Larry Kudlow is a Kool-Aid drinking ideologue and a hack. He's a big believer and advocate of Reaganomics and the Laffer curve and endless deregulation. He's been wrong about basically everything, every step of the way, his entire career. This is a guy who said right before the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession that we weren't going to have a subprime mortgage crisis and we weren't going to have a Great Recession. We weren't even going to have a downturn. So, I mean, just that alone, it's like strike one, you're out. That's it. You don't know what you're talking about. He's against raising the minimum wage. He might even be against having any minimum wage. So anyway, he's a hardcore right-wing economic goon. He's a believer in like Austrian economics. Well, he went from the Trump administration, where he continued his elitist bullshit policies, and Trump allowed him to do that. He went from there to now back on TV, and he's going to go after here the PRO Act, which is a pro-union piece of legislation. Let's see what he has to say.
President Biden's pitch for unions is about something that's called the PRO Act, as in Pro-Union Act. By the way, private unions today are only 6% of the private workforce. That's all. Working folks have been voting with their feet away from union dues and rules for quite some time. Now, anti-growth provisions in this PRO Act really have nothing to do with the middle-class economy and everything to do with a union left-wing ideological wish list. Right-to-work laws in 27 states could be erased. This, even though right-to-work states have much stronger economic growth than union states. The card check provision would end secret ballots in union elections. The gig economy would be badly damaged with a very narrow definition of independent contractor. And union harassment of workers would occur if employers are forced to release personal information. Snap union elections would give companies little time to tell their story. Really? What this is about is plain and simple. It's about worker freedom. In a free country, blessed with free speech, why shouldn't our workforce be free to choose on a level playing field whether they want union dues and rules or whether they want complete right to work freedom?
This is hilarious for a number of reasons. He keeps using the word freedom. This is about freedom. This is about personal choice. This is about giving workers the ability to make their own mind up. So he's trying to act like the pro-union people are anti-freedom and the anti-union people are pro-freedom. That's ridiculous. I mean, first of all, this guy is a hardcore capitalist. That's what he is. Think about the way capitalism functions. Now, I'm not doing a value judgment here. I'm just being descriptive, okay? The way it works is you have an owner, and the owner could be your boss, or the owner could hire like a manager, an executive, somebody at the top, and they're your boss. And if you work for them, they tell you to do stuff, you have to do it. So I like the way Noam Chomsky describes this. He says that in capitalism, each company is its own little tyranny. It's its own little dictatorship, where the owner is like the emperor or the king, and then they have somebody underneath them, or sometimes they're the ones who call all the shots and make all the decisions, but usually they hire somebody underneath them who they handle the day-to-day stuff and they call all the shots. But for shit sure, you have no freedom as a worker, not even close. You basically sell your labor on the marketplace, rent your labor on the marketplace, and you're told what to do by a higher-up. That would be the opposite of freedom. That would be, I'm submitting to be a part of a little tyranny, a little dictatorship. That's what it is. Now, look at the way he twists the reality of the situation. And he says, well, but you got to give people the choice. I guess you're anti-choice. If you're pro-union, you're anti-choice. What's the real purpose of unions? The real purpose of unions is to do something called collective bargaining. Collective bargaining means you and a bunch of your fellow workers get together, work together, and you collectively negotiate with the boss, because you have more power when you're in solidarity with your fellow workers than you do when you're negotiating by yourself. See, in a negotiation between a single worker and a boss or an owner, think about it. Who has all the power in that negotiation? The boss has all the power. It's like they could basically say, agree to all my terms or piss off and go find something else. So I'm going to tell you everything. I'm going to tell you the terms of the deal, and you can either accept it or not. If you don't accept it, get the fuck out of here. So it's not an equal negotiation. It's not a fair negotiation. All the power is on the side of the owner or the boss. But when you collectively bargain, see, now you take that power imbalance and you reduce it. You reduce the extreme inequities in that power balance. So now when you work together with all of your fellow workers, you have a fighting chance to get better terms in a negotiation. Now, by the way, I'm explaining all this to you. Is it like, oh, Larry Kudlow doesn't know this? No, he knows it. He absolutely knows it. But he's an ideologue, and he's arguing on the side of the capitalist owner class. So, but he's well aware of what happens with unions. So, for example, he brings up, oh my God, right-to-work laws would be, basically eliminated with this legislation. To which I respond, good. Because in reality, when you look at the numbers, right-to-work states are really right-to-work for less states. There's been detailed studies and analysis on this, and they found out that on average, I believe the number is about, I'm going, from 5 or 6 years ago, so forgive me if I'm a little bit off, but I think it's about $1,200 less per year is what workers make in right-to-work states, and they have worse benefits. Again, why is that? Because when you collectively bargain, you're going to get better terms than if you're negotiating when you're one person with your boss. So in other words, it's not an open question. Collective bargaining helps workers and gives them better contracts and better deals and better terms. The best example of that is a lot of the Scandinavian countries. A lot of them have almost universal collective bargaining. So if you're a worker, you're just in a union, like that's the default setting. And guess what? They don't even have minimum wage protections in a lot of those countries. Why? Because the union contracts are so strong that the minimum wage that people make is above what any, legal minimum wage would set. So think about that. That's how good the outlook is for workers when there's collective bargaining. You get, paid vacation time by law, great benefits, more money. It's just, this is what happens. But again, Larry Kudlow knows this, but he's not on the side of the workers. He's on the side of the owners and of the wealthy and of the billionaires and of the corporations. So he brings up, well, unions are only 6% of the private sector. And he frames that as like, because we're giving people freedom and people are choosing not to be in a union. No, I would argue that the fact that unions only make up 6% of private sector workers, it has a lot to do with the fact that over the years, the rules have been rigged in favor of the owner class and against working people. And by the way, when we had higher rates of unionization in America, would you look at that? We had a thriving, much stronger working class and middle class. Again, they don't tell you that part. But when you look back in U.S. history, at the time that was called the Golden Age of Economic Expansion, post-World War II period, we had a middle class that was the envy of the world, and we had much higher rates of unionization. That's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence. When you have more unions, you help workers more, and they have better terms in their contracts and in their deals. That's how it works. So, and you mix that with, we had higher marginal tax rates on the wealthy, we had the New Deal programs thriving. I mean, there's a reason why that was the golden age of economic expansion. Then he brings up the gig economy. He's basically arguing that, well, this is going to hurt the gig economy, and that would be a shame. That wouldn't be a shame. The gig economy, what's happening now is you have these giant businesses that are trying to classify their workforce not as employees, but as gig economy independent contractors. And the reason they're doing that is not what they tell you, like, oh, we want you to have more freedom and make your own schedule and all that stuff. No. The reason they're doing that is because they don't want the more strict labor standards that accompany the classification of being an employee. That's why they're doing it. So they want to be able to pay less and not give you as many contractual rights. And that's really the reason why they do it, is because they sort of want to be able to screw you. And if they classify you as a gig economy independent contractor as opposed to an employee, they could screw you. So that's why they're doing it. Again, he doesn't tell you that part. And then one of the interesting parts of this legislation, the PRO Act, is that it prevents management from doing basically anti-union propaganda, because that's one of the things that happens is they try to convince you that unions are bad for you and, you know, they're going to cause you more pain than they're worth and you have to pay dues and you'll make less money. Like they try to just do propaganda. This bill prevents management from being able to do anti-union propaganda, and he, of course, again, frames that as a bad thing. So just look at how misleading that segment is, man. That segment is incredibly misleading. He acts like, oh, I'm in favor of freedom and people on the right are in favor of freedom and the anti-union people are in favor of freedom and these pro-union people are against freedom. Utter nonsense. I would argue you have more freedom the more you have financial stability and security. And you know how you get more financial stability and security? Being part of a union. So really, I'd say we're the ones who are more pro-freedom and they're the ones who are more anti-freedom. You know? So he'll never tell you the simple fact that unions correlate with higher wages and more benefits for workers, and that's a good thing for workers. He will try to obfuscate and deflect and rationalize and tap dance around that all day. But he's an ideologue, he's a partisan hack, and he's misleading you on purpose.